Beneath the marble floors of the Vatican lies a world few will ever see, a labyrinth of sealed doors and forgotten manuscripts, where history's most dangerous secrets are guarded in silence. For centuries, whispers of this archive have fueled conspiracy theories. Is it merely a collection of dusty letters, or something far more powerful? Inside these vaults are stories of empires rising and falling, of scientists condemned, of knights betrayed, of popes entangled in scandal, and of truths too dangerous to reveal. This is not just history, it is a mirror of humanity's struggle with power, faith, and knowledge itself. Join us as we descend into the hidden vaults of the Vatican. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, once called the Archivum Secretum, stretches across more than 53 miles of shelving. Despite centuries of speculation, the word secretum never meant secret in the modern sense. It meant private, a collection belonging to the Pope himself, closed to outside eyes. Yet to this day, the very thought of what lies inside has stirred imaginations across the world. Here are records of papal decrees that altered kingdoms, correspondence with emperors and kings, and documents that decided the fates of entire civilizations. Some files describe inquisitions, others capture whispers of scientific revolution, and some hold the raw power of religion colliding with politics. For centuries, access was nearly impossible. Only the Pope and his chosen scholars could step inside. But in 1881, Pope Leo III opened the archive to researchers, ushering in a slow unveiling of its treasures. Even so, restrictions remained, and not every file has seen daylight. In 2019, Pope Francis announced that its name would be changed from Secret Archive to Apostolic Archive, a symbolic gesture of openness. Yet, the mysteries remain, because for every document that has been revealed, there are countless more still locked behind doors marked non consultabile, not to be consulted. And so, the Vatican Archive is less a library and more a living puzzle, an endless corridor where each unlocked shelf raises more questions than it answers. Among the shelves of the Vatican Archive lies one of the most sensitive collections of the modern era, the documents of Pope Pius XII during World War II. For decades, a single question haunted historians. Did the Pope remain silent in the face of the Holocaust? Or did he quietly resist, using secret channels to save lives while balancing the Church's survival? In 2020, Pope Francis authorized the opening of these wartime files. Almost instantly, scholars from across the world poured into the reading rooms, handling boxes of correspondence, reports, and coded communications written during Europe's darkest hour. The image that emerges is far more complex than the simplified accusations of silence. Inside are letters revealing nuns and priests sheltering Jewish families inside convents, even while Nazi troops marched outside. Reports show underground networks of aid, moving food, disguises, and forged papers to those on the run. One account describes the Vatican quietly negotiating with German officers to allow certain prisoners to escape. Yet other documents reveal caution, sometimes even hesitation. Pius XII feared that an open condemnation of Hitler might bring violent retaliation against Catholics across occupied Europe. In his mind, a public protest might sacrifice millions for words that could not stop the slaughter. Was this prudence or moral failure? The archive does not give easy answers. Instead, it reveals a pope torn between diplomacy and conscience, trying to hold the Church together while the world collapsed. What is undeniable, however, is that within these dusty files are glimpses of courage, fear, faith, and compromise, the raw materials of history itself. Shift the pages of the Vatican Archive back 7 centuries, and you arrive at one of the darkest legends in medieval history: the downfall of the Knights Templar. For generations, the Templars were more than warriors. They were guardians of pilgrims, keepers of treasure, and financiers who invented systems that resemble modern banking. They grew wealthy, too wealthy for the comfort of kings. On October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the mass arrest of the Templars. Accusations ranged from blasphemy to unspeakable rituals, but behind the charges lay another truth. Philip was deeply in debt to the Templars, and destroying them meant erasing what he owed. For centuries, it was believed that the papacy fully condemned the order. Yet in 2001, a forgotten parchment surfaced within the Vatican archives, a document that turned the accepted story upside down. It was the Chinon Parchment, the record of a secret investigation conducted by Pope Clement V. What it revealed was astonishing. The Templars were interrogated, yes, but absolved of heresy by the Pope himself. The rites that seemed shocking, such as spitting near the cross during initiation, were explained as tests of loyalty, not acts of disbelief. The Pope forgave them. The Church reconciled them. And yet, under immense political pressure from King Philip, Clement dissolved the order anyway, not for heresy but to preserve the fragile balance between crown and papacy. The archives contain detailed accounts of Templar wealth and property transfers, showing how their vast estates were absorbed by rival orders like the Hospitallers. Other documents quietly trace the fate of ordinary Templars, some pensioned, others absorbed into monasteries, and only the leaders executed for relapsing into alleged heresy. It is a chilling reminder of how power, not faith, decided the destiny of one of the most mysterious orders in Christian history. The Chinon Parchment's rediscovery did not exonerate the Templars completely, but it shattered centuries of legend, proving that their destruction was not spiritual justice. It was politics, pure and ruthless. From the age of crusades and knights, we turn the pages of the Vatican archive to the 17th century, an era when science began to challenge theology and the universe itself was placed on trial. In 1610, Galileo Galilei aimed his handmade telescope toward the heavens. What he saw shattered the old world order. Jupiter had moons orbiting it, a celestial body not revolving around Earth. The heavens were not immutable but dynamic. The universe was vast, restless, and alive. Galileo's discoveries supported the heliocentric model proposed by Copernicus, that the Earth revolved around the Sun, not the other way around. To us, this seems obvious, but in the 17th century it was a dangerous truth. The Church's interpretation of Scripture placed Earth at the center of creation. To question that was to question the order of God himself. Galileo was summoned to Rome. Within the walls of the Vatican, his ideas were weighed not just as science, but as a threat to authority. The trial transcripts preserved in the archive tell the story in chilling detail. Galileo, once admired, stood accused of vehement suspicion of heresy. The tribunal pressed him. Would he abandon the Copernican system or defy the guardians of doctrine? In the end, the scientist was forced to kneel to renounce before cardinals and inquisitors the truth his eyes had seen. Legend says he whispered under his breath, "Epos si muove," and yet it moves. Whether or not those words were spoken, the irony remains. His forced silence could not silence the stars. The documents reveal his sentence: life imprisonment, commuted to house arrest. For the remaining years of his life, Galileo was confined, his works monitored, his ideas suppressed. And yet, tucked away in letters and marginal notes preserved in the archive, we see glimpses of his persistence. He continued his studies quietly, writing secretly, sending manuscripts to be published beyond the reach of Roman censors. It would take centuries before the Vatican officially acknowledged its error, and even longer before the Galileo affair became a symbol of the uneasy dance between faith and reason. The archive does not just tell us how Galileo was condemned. It reveals the deeper truth of how knowledge itself has always been contested ground. Among the Vatican's most imposing legacies is a list once feared by scholars, writers and thinkers across Europe, a list known simply as the Index. For nearly 400 years, beginning in 1559, the Catholic Church maintained a catalogue of prohibited works. Books considered dangerous to faith or morals were blacklisted, censored, or burned. To read them without permission was a sin, sometimes even a crime. The archive preserves copies of this index bound in thick parchment, inked in firm Latin script. Each entry is like a window into the battles of ideas, from theology to philosophy, from politics to science. On its pages, names that shaped the modern world stand accused. Copernicus, whose ideas Galileo would later defend. Descartes, who sought certainty through reason. Voltaire, who wielded wit against dogma. Even writers of poetry and literature were silenced if their words threatened orthodoxy. But the Index was more than censorship. It was a mirror of fear. A fear that human reason might outpace divine authority. Each banned book is a signpost of tension, the desire to protect souls clashing with the hunger for discovery. And yet, despite its power, the Index could never fully contain the flow of thought. Smuggled copies crossed borders, secret readings were held in candlelit rooms, and some of the very ideas condemned in Rome went on to spark revolutions, shape governments, and redefine human freedom. By the time the Index was formally abolished in 1966, its shadow had already become a paradox. For in trying to bury books, the Church had often immortalized them. What was forbidden became irresistible, and what was silenced found ways to speak louder. Today, as historians leaf through these catalogues in the archive, they see more than a list of bans. They see the story of a struggle between control and curiosity, between the guardians of truth and the seekers who dared to question it. Buried deep within the shelves of the Vatican archive are manuscripts that once shook the foundations of faith, the so-called lost Gospels. These texts, often discovered in deserts, caves, or monasteries, tell stories of Jesus and his followers that differ from the familiar pages of the New Testament. The Gospel of Thomas, with its cryptic sayings about divine light within each person. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, offering glimpses of her as a teacher and visionary, not merely a follower. The Gospel of Judas, where betrayal becomes reimagined as obedience to a higher plan. For centuries, these writings were deemed too dangerous, not because they lacked faith, but because they offered another vision of faith, a vision where salvation came not through obedience to authority, but through personal awakening. The archive holds records of how early councils selected which books would become scripture and which would be branded heresy. The debates were fierce. Bishops argued, emperors influenced, and entire communities saw their sacred texts consigned to oblivion. Yet fragments of these rejected Gospels survived, hidden in jars, buried beneath sand, and whispered from teacher to student in secret gatherings. When rediscovered in modern times, Nag Hammadi in 1945 and other finds that followed, they revealed a Christianity far more diverse than the one we inherited. The Vatican's guarded notes on these discoveries show both fascination and caution. To acknowledge them openly meant admitting that Christian origins were not simple, but complex, contested, and full of voices long suppressed. And so the archive does not only preserve the official story, it preserves the traces of forgotten stories, the echoes of a Christianity that might have been. For some, these Gospels are mere curiosities. For others, they are keys to mysteries still unfolding. But for all who encounter them, they remind us that history is not a single path, but a labyrinth of choices, of words written and unwritten, of truths revealed and truths erased. And so, after walking through centuries of hidden corridors, from crusades to censored books, from Galileo's trial to forbidden Gospels, we arrive at the heart of the Vatican's secret archives. What do these shelves really hold? The answer is both less and more than legend imagines. Not a single vault of buried treasure, but 85 kilometers of shelves lined with the raw material of history, letters, maps, papal decrees, witness testimonies, whispered confessions and records of choices that shape civilization. Some say the archive hides truths too explosive to reveal, prophecies of doom, hidden relics, or evidence of conspiracies. But the reality is far subtler and perhaps more unsettling. What the archive truly reveals is how fragile truth can be, how often it has been negotiated, edited, silenced, or defended. Each parchment here carries the fingerprints of human struggle, power against conscience, faith against doubt, memory against forgetting. And yet, the archive also teaches us that nothing stays buried forever. The lost Gospels resurfaced. The secrets of Pius XII came to light. The condemnation of Galileo was reversed. History, like a river, carves its way back into the open. For the modern world, the lesson is clear. What is hidden today may be uncovered tomorrow. The future will judge us, just as we now judge the past. The Vatican's secret archives remain closed to most eyes, but their very existence whispers a paradox, that secrecy cannot silence curiosity, and that faith, power, and truth are always locked in a dance as old as history itself. As the camera pulls back, we see the endless corridors stretch into the distance, shelves fading into shadow. And in that silence, one question lingers: what secrets still wait to be found?